waited an entire year to see Virgil, aka Nelo Angelo, in action, and Season 2 of Netflix's Devil May Cry certainly didn't hold back on giving us the anti-hero arc we had all been so eagerly awaiting. From iconic fight scenes with Dante and Virgil, to the not-so-conventional heart-to-heart between the two estranged brothers, to the badass battle between the God of Chaos and the Sons of Sparda, we pretty much got to experience it all. The limelight on Virgil is what really moved us. He's consistently hell-bent on proving himself as the bad guy, but deep down, you can see the suffering he had to undergo throughout his entire life, especially with the Demon King Mundus controlling and manipulating him every step of the way. If you're a hardcore enthusiast of the Devil May Cry franchise, you're probably already aware of how every major character within the games is as emotionally cooked as they come, but even then, we think Virgil has always stood out, and not because of his insanely sharp fighting style or his reluctance to show any emotions. You see, Virgil's motivations always run deeper than they initially appear, and the cliffhanger ending of Season 2 was the perfect representation of that. One important thing before we dive in, Netflix's Devil May Cry isn't a one-to-one adaptation of the game timeline, so we'll use the Netflix version as our jumping-off point, while the main breakdown follows Virgil's original game continuity and the official supplemental material. Dante and Virgil have always been the heart of Devil May Cry's overarching lore, but as compared to his younger brother, who tries to do the right thing by the right means no matter what, Virgil has evolved from being a bad guy to an anti-hero who makes extreme choices as a coping mechanism against his fear of being powerless. Given how Virgil's ending is a big question mark in the Season 2 finale, we think now is as good a time as any to discuss his entire story arc in the DMC games. Virgil's early life was nothing short of tragic in the OG gaming lore. If you've ever played Devil May Cry, you probably know that initially, Virgil was one of the main antagonists of the franchise. However, his reason for choosing to walk down a darker path instead of following in his father's footsteps, like his younger twin Dante, was truly tragic. Long before the events of the series, the legendary demon knight Sparda rebelled against the demon emperor Mundus and his horde of demons in order to save mankind. After defeating Mundus, Sparda sealed the gateway between the demon world and the human world. Following this, Sparda settled on Earth and lived peacefully among humans for a time. In fact, he became a legendary protector of humanity before eventually vanishing. He was also connected to Fortuna, where the Order of the Sword later worshipped him almost like a god. But many years later, during the 20th century, Sparda fell in love with a human woman named Eva, and together they had twin sons, Virgil and Dante. Devil May Cry 5 later connects the Sparda family tragedy to a secluded family mansion near Redgrave City, and while growing up, the brothers constantly competed and trained together under their father's guidance. Sadly, that peaceful life didn't last forever, because one day, under mysterious circumstances, Sparda just up and disappeared, leaving Eva to raise Dante and Virgil all on her own. Now, when Dante and Virgil were about 8 years old, their lives changed forever, especially after their 8th birthday, when Eva gave both twin brothers one half of the perfect amulet as a keepsake deeply tied to their father's legacy. But before tragedy struck, Virgil had already started developing the quiet, introspective personality that would define him later in life. Because of his love for classic literature and poetry, Virgil often visited a man who shared the same interests with him. Out of all the writers, he became especially fascinated with the works of William Blake, and after seeing how much the boy admired Blake's poetry, the man eventually gifted Virgil a collection of Blake's poems. Virgil carefully wrote his name on the back cover of the book, and when the man asked why, Virgil explained that he and Dante were always fighting and arguing over things. That book would go on to become one of Virgil's most treasured possessions for the rest of his life, even well into adulthood. Having said that, not long after his birthday, demons sent by the Prince of the Underworld, Mundus, attacked the Sparda family home, set much of the mansion ablaze, and tore the family apart forever. However, during this attack, Virgil was just a few yards away from the house and playing alone at a nearby playground, where at some point the demons ambushed him, and he eventually found himself trapped in a cemetery, completely surrounded by them. After watching his house burn into flames, the trauma forced Virgil to awaken his dormant demon side for the very first time, and just like that, he killed all the demons around him by wielding Yamato, and then ran towards the house. Even though he survived the attack, Virgil had to go on the run after believing that his mother chose to save Dante and abandoned him instead. What he never learned was that Eva had rescued Dante first and then rushed back into the burning house searching for Virgil. Tragically, she died while trying to find him. Because Virgil never learned that truth, that feeling of abandonment stayed with him for the rest of his life. This traumatizing experience is also what planted the seeds of his obsession with power and his refusal to ever feel weak or helpless again, ultimately shaping him into the man he would become. What does Virgil look like within the games? So you probably already know what Virgil looks like in both his human form and his devil trigger form from the Netflix show. Now, coming to his appearance in the games, Virgil has very fair skin, which is often mistaken for being too pale because of how light his complexion is. Perhaps his most recognizable trait is his slicked back white hair with only a single strand falling along the right side of his face. His style befits the calm and stoic expression he wears, which gives him a cold and intimidating presence. However, when his hair falls down naturally or gets wet, Virgil looks almost identical to his younger twin brother. Like Dante, he also has striking blue eyes, further emphasizing how similar the two brothers really are, despite their vastly different personalities. Coming to his clothes, it goes without saying that Virgil's outfit perfectly reflects his intimidating personality. He's most commonly seen wearing a long blue coat fastened with silver buttons and split into 3 coattails at the bottom. The coat also has intricate white snake-like patterns around the collar, including a snake design that stretches from his left shoulder down across the outfit. You can also see gold trim lines at the edges of the coat, while the inside is decorated with an ornate golden floral pattern that gives him a sort of regal appearance. Not just that, the sleeves are also detailed with multiple gold button straps around the cuffs. Now, in Devil May Cry 4 Special Edition, the coat includes similar straps on the shoulders as well, but those have silver buttons instead of gold. Apparently, before confronting demons directly, Virgil often concealed this outfit beneath a long brown hooded cloak in order to bank on the element of surprise. Underneath his signature blue coat, Virgil wears a navy blue ascot around his neck, along with a black sleeveless vest that exposes his toned arms and shoulders. He also wears tan fingerless gloves, a brown snakeskin belt with a silver buckle, and dark green pants covered in a subtle scale-like pattern. Lastly, to tie everything in, he wears tall brown boots decorated with 2 gold buckled straps near the top. In several cutscenes from Devil May Cry 3 Dante's Awakening, Virgil can also be seen wearing his golden half of the perfect amulet around his neck. However, despite its importance to the story, the amulet is not consistently part of his standard in-game character model. Also, we should mention that as corrupt Virgil, his look transitions to something much more unsettling as his skin turns pale gray and almost lifeless, while glowing blue veins pulse across his face, giving him that corrupted and unstable look. His eyes also change dramatically, becoming deep red with black pupils, which makes him look completely demonic. At this point, Virgil no longer wears his usual outfit and instead takes on clothing inspired by his father, Sparda. His half of the perfect amulet is attracted to the outfit where Dante's half would normally be, but in Devil May Cry 4, this decision is slightly altered, with the coat once again split into 3 coattails, similar to the one Virgil wore in his younger days. But that's not the end of it. When Virgil fully becomes the corrupted Black Knight, Nelo Angelo, his appearance grows even more inhuman. His skin becomes ghostly white, his blue veins remain visible across his body, and his eyes glow red without any visible pupils, thus making him look anything but human. Now, in Devil May Cry 5, Virgil looks very similar to how he appeared in the 3rd game, but he now carries a more matured and weathered appearance due to the years that have passed. While his signature hairstyle and calm demeanor remain mostly unchanged, he now looks older, sharper, and more battle-worn. But what's different here is the change of outfit, because instead of his classic blue coat, Virgil now wears a long black coat that has glowing light blue snake patterns. Sure, the coat still features the 3 separated coattails from his older design, but the edges now appear slightly torn and worn down. Underneath that coat, Virgil no longer wears his traditional ascot. Instead, he sports a black sleeveless turtleneck with a zipper beneath a dark midnight blue vest. He further completes the look with charcoal gray fingerless gloves, black pants, and dark boots partially covered by teal-colored gaiters, giving him a more modern and practical appearance while still retaining his elegant style. Having said that, when he initially shows up in the game, Virgil was very weak and exhausted, so in order to hide his condition, he wore a long, tattered black hooded cloak over his outfit. Parts of his body, especially one side of his face, are seen to be pale white and covered with glowing blue veins to show the lingering signs of the corruption and damage he suffered after becoming Nelo Angelo and falling under Mundus's control. His damaged body visually echoes the corruption and trauma linked to his time as Nelo Angelo. Virgil's adventures in the overarching Devil May Cry franchise. Just like Dante, Virgil has appeared in almost every DMC game, along with leaving his mark in other media like manga. Given that we'll be touching on Virgil's game canon story and official supplemental material tied to the main DMC continuity, let's start strong with Devil May Cry 3 manga. About a year before the events of Devil May Cry 3 Dante's Awakening, Virgil crossed paths with Arkham, aka Jester, while searching through his library for a particular book. During their conversation, Arkham told Virgil about the legend of the Demon Negru and the immense demonic power sealed within it. For those who don't know, the Demon Negru is the gate that Sparda created between Earth and the demon realm. Of course, Virgil was very intrigued by the possibility of gaining that power, and so he agreed to work with Arkham in order to support his plan to raise the tower. Arkham explained that, in order to awaken the Demon Negru, we first needed to break several mystical seals. These seals took the form of fallen angels connected to the 7 deadly sins, and each had to be identified by name or the barrier could be undone. While Arkham searched for the location of these seals, Virgil stayed at his mansion alongside Alice. At one point, Virgil wandered through the city and was mistakenly identified as Dante by Enzo Ferrino. Rather than being annoyed, Virgil seemed genuinely interested when he learned that Dante was living nearby. In fact, it seemed to excite him a little. But after meeting with Dante, the conversation between the two brothers quickly turned hostile, with both exchanging threats and insults as tensions kept rising between them. During the encounter, Virgil finally revealed his true goal: to raise the Demon Negru and reopen the gateway to the demon world in order to obtain its power. When Dante makes it clear that he intends to stop him, Virgil mocks his brother by revealing that he possessed the other half of the amulet, which Alice had stolen earlier. This immediately provoked Dante into attacking him. The two clashed briefly, but Virgil easily overpowered Dante during the fight, showing just how much stronger and more focused he'd become. However, instead of keeping the amulet, Virgil casually gave Dante's half back to him, but not before mocking him by confidently claiming that he could take it back whenever he pleased. The chapter ends with Arkham preparing the ritual that would awaken the Demon Negru. Devil May Cry 3 Dante's Awakening. In this game, Lady's father, Arkham, helped Virgil break the first 7 seals that Sparda had placed on the Demon Negru by guiding him to the Forbidden Land hidden at the base of the tower. Later, Virgil was seen with Arkham at the very top as the massive tower rose from the ground. But when the Hell Vanguard they sent to kill Dante failed, Virgil didn't hesitate to cut the demon down on the spot. Following that, he stayed at the tower's peak, waiting for Dante to arrive. At one point, he even sent Arkham to deal with Lady, who had become quite the problem. When Dante finally made it to the top, the brothers traded some sharp words before launching into an intense battle, which ended with Virgil taking Dante's half of the perfect amulet. Then, just as Dante's devil trigger kicked in and things were about to escalate, Arkham stepped in and convinced Virgil to back off, as they already had everything they needed. With that, Virgil and Arkham leapt off the tower together, returning to the Forbidden Land to continue their plan. Now, as they showed up near the final door leading to the Lair of Judgment, Virgil finally revealed how he had been aware of Arkham's betrayal all along. Without hesitation, he took Arkham down with what seemed to be a fatal blow, and then stepped into the chamber alone in order to begin the ritual to open the gate to the demon world. But this ritual didn't go uninterrupted, as Beowulf, who was now blinded and mistook Virgil for Dante, charged straight into him. Yup, that was a blunder on his part, as Virgil ended up brutally cutting down the demon, and after the legendary fight, Virgil claimed Beowulf's soul and transformed it into his iconic powerful devil arm. Virgil then began to unlock the seals, and when Dante rushed to reach the final seal, he saw his brother was already there, struggling to unlock it without success. Of course, the two again clashed in a fierce battle, and before either could claim victory, Lady showed up and interrupted the fight, forcing it to end in a draw as both brothers were left wounded and exhausted. That's when Jester revealed himself and smugly announced that everyone had played their parts perfectly in his plan, just like he wanted them to. Apparently, he shifted back and forth between his Jester persona and his true identity, Arkham, to make sure everyone did their due diligence without knowing. He then broke down exactly why Virgil's ritual had failed and how both he and Dante had been manipulated. With the final steps now clear, Arkham completed the ritual himself and toyed with the 3 weakened warriors as he waited for the tower to activate. However, once the Demon Negru activated, he knocked all of them off the rising platform, causing Virgil to plummet deep into the abyss below. Later, after Dante entered the Netherworld, Virgil was seen passing through the Divine Library, with Lady still huddled up, wounded, and in grief after her battle with Dante. She then heard his footsteps and looked up to see who it was, but by that time, he had already gone through the door that Dante took. Following this, Virgil interrupted Dante's fight with the Force Edge-powered Arkham, and the twins finished the villain off together. However, this doesn't mean that Virgil gave up on his goal of obtaining the Force Edge, and so the brothers began to fight yet again. Although Dante was able to defeat Virgil, he couldn't convince him to return to the human world, and so Virgil allowed himself to fall even deeper into the netherworld. Finally, in the game's epilogue, Virgil was seen in the Room of Fallen Ones while 3 glowing orbs approached him. When Virgil recognized the approaching devil, he remarked how, if Sparda was capable of defeating the Demon King, then he too should be capable of it, before discarding his scabbard and charging in for the fight. Devil May Cry. In the first original Devil May Cry game, we meet Virgil as the corrupted Black Knight, Nelo Angelo, who fights Dante multiple times on Mallet Island. During their first confrontation, Dante's amulet slipped out just as Nelo Angelo tried to deliver the killing blow, and the sight of that awakened Virgil's dormant memories, which caused Nelo Angelo intense agony. He throws Dante aside and disappears in a geyser of blue and purple flames, but Nelo Angelo met Dante again in the gardens, and once again he was defeated, thus forcing him to flee. Ultimately, in their final confrontation, Nelo Angelo removed his helmet to reveal Virgil's face. But even then, Dante didn't realize who it was, and so he fought and defeated Nelo Angelo for the final time. Following this, Nelo Angelo dropped his greatsword and staggered backwards. The Black Knight rose into the air and clutched his head as he screamed in pain before he disappeared in a torrent of blue flame, with only Virgil's half of the amulet left behind, falling to the ground below. When he looked at the amulet, Dante had a flashback to when he and his twin brother first received their respective halves of the perfect amulet from their mother. It was then that he realized that Nelo Angelo was actually his twin brother Virgil all along. Devil May Cry 4 Special Edition. Years before the events of Devil May Cry 4, Virgil traveled to the city of Fortuna to investigate the mysterious Order of the Sword. Upon arriving, he found himself questioning why the people of Fortuna worship Sparda as if he were a god. While exploring the city, Virgil was suddenly surrounded by a group of scarecrow demons. However, this encounter barely slowed him down as he effortlessly cut through them before continuing his investigation deeper into Fortuna. As Virgil learned more about the Order and their beliefs, he began reflecting on whether their devotion to Sparda was truly misguided or not. Eventually, he left the city, but not before quietly declaring that one day the Order would witness the true power possessed by Sparda's son. Now, in Devil May Cry 4 Special Edition, a subtle visual hint foreshadows the connection between Virgil and Nero, as the shadow Virgil casts briefly resembles Nero's Devil Trigger form. DMC5 later confirms Nero to be Virgil's son, and DMC4 Special Edition's Fortuna prologue strongly implies Nero was conceived during Virgil's earlier visit to the city. Devil May Cry Visions of V Manga. In this official manga series, which ties into the events of the 5th Devil May Cry game, after surviving his time as Mundus's corrupted knight, Nelo Angelo, Virgil eventually returned to the human world in a crumbling near-death state. After refusing to accept this fate for himself, he made his way to Fortuna to take back Yamato from Nero. Now, Virgil confronted him briefly in Nero's garage by ripping his Devil Bringer arm off at the elbow and causing the arm to be absorbed into Virgil, with Yamato reappearing in his hand. With his sword once more in his possession, Virgil immediately left through a portal created by Yamato and arrived at his abandoned childhood home. After going inside, Virgil impaled himself with Yamato in order to separate his human and demon halves, which ended up becoming V and Urizen respectively. The two beings that split from Virgil proceeded to embark on 2 separate journeys. While Urizen went to pursue the power of the clip-off fruit, V swore to reunite with Urizen and bring Virgil back as one complete being. After some time, Dante was successful in defeating Urizen, which provided an opportunity for V to merge with him. Apparently, it took a single second for V and Urizen to reunite, and that's when Virgil's consciousness, taking the form of his 8-year-old self, spoke with V, as V attempted to convince him that they needed to begin facing their fears head-on instead of running away all the time. That could only happen if they allowed themselves to accept Dante into their lives, and just like that, Virgil ultimately agreed to fully merge with V. In doing so, his original self was revived, and Virgil finally returned with his body fully healed as he appeared in the place where Urizen and V once existed. Devil May Cry 5. Several years after the events of Devil May Cry 4, Virgil was finally able to return from the demon world and emerge from Mundus's influence. However, his body was severely weakened and was now crumbling after going from one battle to another. He eventually confronted Nero and, despite his weakened condition, was able to completely rip his Devilbringer arm off and regain Yamato, leaving Nero behind in a bleeding and unconscious state. Having regained his sword, Virgil then returned to his family's burned mansion after killing the two hostile riot demons living in it. He was so desperate about wanting to defeat Dante and seize Sparda's power that Virgil stabbed himself with Yamato in order to separate his human half from his demon half so that he could gain power without having to be hindered by any human thought or emotion. This, in turn, sparked the birth of V, his human half, and Urizen, his demon half, along with 3 demon familiars. Now, more than a month later, after Urizen was defeated by Dante, a dying V approached him and commented on how he and Urizen were one and the same before he impaled Urizen with his cane. This, in turn, once again merged the two halves together and in the process restored Virgil. Following this, Dante almost immediately attacked him, but Virgil repelled his exhausted and wounded brother with ease. He told Dante that he considered defeating him in such a weakened state to be meaningless and advised him to regain his strength before leaving for the top of Cliphoff. But before that, Virgil also thanked Nero for shepherding V. Now, a short while later, miles above the Earth's surface, at the top of the Cliphoff, Virgil was wondering about his and Dante's respective fates and whether or not their lives might have been different if their positions had been switched on the day of their mother's death. This introspection was apparently sparked after Dante told Urizen that their mother had in fact not abandoned Virgil in favor of Dante. She simply came across Dante first, and so she hit him before going on to continue searching for Virgil until she died. Virgil then sat down on a black crystalline growth and waited for his twin brother. When Dante finally arrived, he demanded that Virgil hand over the Yamato so that he could no longer open portals of that kind to the underworld, which had allowed the Cliphoff to grow. However, as Dante expected, Virgil refused, and the two brothers engaged in an all-out battle to the death. Sadly, after a long and grueling duel, neither of them could best the other, and, as a result, both brothers were left absolutely battered and exhausted. However, during this battle, Dante informed Virgil that Nero was his son, much to the latter's surprise. They both then transformed into their Sin Devil trigger forms and charged at each other, looking to end the fight in one final clash. Thankfully, the fight was abruptly stopped by Nero in his true demon form. He proclaimed that he wasn't going to allow their rivalry to continue any longer. Nero also refused to stand by as they both tried to kill each other. Hearing this, Virgil was mildly amused by his son's earnestness, almost thinking Nero gave up on his desire to kill him in revenge, and proposed fighting Nero in Dante's place to determine the outcome of their battle. Interestingly enough, Dante, for his part, simply sat the whole thing out. So, after another battle, Nero managed to beat his exhausted father, and along with Dante, he even attempted to convince Virgil that the Cliphoff needed to be destroyed before any other considerations. Although Virgil stubbornly pointed out that he could still fight, he ultimately agreed to help close the portal. Both he and his brother then made their way towards the demon world in order to cut down the tree and close the portal behind them. But before they go, Dante says his goodbyes to Nero and departs. Virgil then declared to his son that he would not lose their next duel and gave Nero his book of William Blake poems as a keepsake before asking him to hold on to it until the next time they saw each other. Later in the demon world, Dante and Virgil approached the base of the tree, only to be surrounded by a horde of lesser demons who were taken care of pretty quickly. Eventually, the tree was completely destroyed, and Virgil closed the portal that Urizen had created, thus trapping him and Dante in hell. A few weeks later, the brothers were seen sparring with each other while bickering over their respective victory tallies. But as the two began another sparring match, they were interrupted by another horde of demons, and they simply continued their petty but playful bickering while slaughtering the demons. By the end of it, it seems like the brothers have finally managed to put aside any genuine grudge, instead focusing on their mutual goal. And with that, we've reached the end of this video. Even if we always see Virgil chasing power in the games, it was nice to see how he really came into his own by the end of the story. Having said that, Netflix has certainly taken a different approach with Virgil's story, but it's nice to see how Adi Shankar has still maintained the essence of the character today. One thing's for certain, Virgil won't be able to win his fight against Mundus alone, so it'll be super cool to see another Sons of Sparda reunion against another megalomaniac villain in a possible future season. What are your thoughts and theories on Virgil's depiction in the Netflix show? Let us know your thoughts in the comment section down below.